Business Athletes, episode 5. This is going to be a good one, guys. It's going to be a good one, and it's all around the missing piece of the equation. The missing piece of the superhuman business athlete fat loss optimization equation that most people don't know about and they absolutely need to factor in. And it's this idea of micronutrients. So most people, when they're thinking about getting in shape and they're doing a diet, they think about protein, carbs, fats, and calories, right? That's a very common thing. They use MyFitnessPal or Chronometer or one of the different diet apps, and they'll plug in they'll estimate their calories, and they'll estimate their protein and the carbs and the fats and all the things. This is called macronutrients. So your macronutrients are your protein, carbs, and fats. Very often, though, one of the reasons why you might find that you get a lot of cravings, or you might find that as you start to diet, you feel like your energy starts to decrease, or maybe your energy is just not good in the first place. Typically, the biofeedback that you will experience when you're not really dialing in your micronutrients properly, so not macro, your micronutrients, so your vitamins, minerals, polyphenols, antioxidants, and more, which I'm going to talk about, when that's not really dialed in well, you will experience the following. You will notice things like increases in hunger and cravings. You will notice that your sleep isn't as good. You will notice that your libido is not as good. You will notice that you feel anxious. You might notice that your mood is not great. You get brain fog. You can't concentrate. There is more than that, but those are the main things initially right out the gate that can be very problematic for people. Think about this, if you want to be a business athlete, if you want to perform at a high level, it's pretty damn hard to do that if you are feeling like crap, if you're getting brain fog and you're not sleeping well. That'll unravel the best of us. And I've found, especially as I've aged, that the missing part of the equation, the micronutrient part of the equation, is what balances the equation and actually makes it solvable. So it's why people, like I said, will have a diet and they struggle to maintain the result. I see this all the time. I see people do 75 hard and they get to the 75 days and they barely just make it over the finish line, and they're so fried and they're so strained and they've been white knuckling so hard that they just implode on themselves. And they're not, and in all truth, they're not even in very good shape. That's just an objective fact. They might be like 15% body fat. And that to me is not that difficult. Now, I'm not criticizing them per se, but what it tells you is that if you're at like 12, 15, 20% body fat after white knuckling 75 hard and you can't sustain your diet model, something is really broken. And you have to reapproach the equation. So I'm going to give you some really good tactics in this episode because I want you to be able to solve this. I want you to leave this episode with some tangible action items and things you can do that will help you move the needle. So what I want you to think about is I want you to think about micronutrients. So I'll call it micronutrients and macros, just so you can hear the difference. So micronutrients are essentially like pieces of the engine. You've got the engine of your vehicle. The micronutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the magnesium, the selenium, the zinc, the boron, the omega-3s, all of these things are like pieces of an engine. And obviously they all come together and create the engine itself. Macros are the fuel. It's the gas. And so if you just were to focus on micronutrients, you might have an engine, but if you don't have the gas, you ain't going nowhere. Equally, if you have a bunch of gas, but you don't have the engine pieces together, you ain't going nowhere. And usually you just end up getting fat because the fuel is what body fat literally is. So the first thing that I want to tell you is that's why when we balance, can you see how when we balance this equation, you can create a Rolls-Royce Phantom of a body where the fuel is high grade and the engine is dialed in. So what do? One of the first things that you will hear me say often, and I say this to my students when they come into my Anomaly Project course, or when they're in my Business Athlete Council, or when they start any one-on-one PKX consulting with me, is I say every day, the concept you must focus on is eat the rainbow. Eat the rainbow. So whenever you have a main meal, as much as you can, obviously, there'll always be times where maybe you're out and you can't necessarily do this, but most of the time, eat the rainbow saying, where's my green? Where's my red? Where's my orange vegetable? The reason why I say this is because every single different colored food is representative of different micronutrients. So for example, carrots are orange, high in beta carotene. Very good for eye health, for retina health. So every single micronutrient helps some type of physiological function, some type of body of cells in your body, whether it's your hair or your skin or your eyes or your bones, muscle contractions, ATP production, mitochondrial health, you name it. So a nice, simple thing, and I like this, eat the rainbow, because it's something that you can tell to your kids. It's a simple thing to remember. And even beyond that, you can think about that as the type of snacks you consume. So things like blueberries, blackberries, goji berries, raspberries, all the different colors. Those things, cucumbers, green, and you got your dark purples and reds. All of these things, and I will typically say, you want to make sure that predominantly all of these foods are foods with one ingredient. Nice rule of thumb, guys, foods with one ingredient. Blueberries are just blueberries. Sweet potato is just sweet potato, right? That way, you're not adding in a bunch of processed inflammatory garbage. So that's a very important rule of thumb that I would say, if you really want to dial in and become that A-grade business athlete, 90+% of your diet is foods with only one ingredient. And obviously it depends where you are in the spectrum. If you're starting out and you're eating McDonald's for breakfast and Domino's for dinner, then I would just say just add the rainbow in wherever you can and just start. Fail forward and start imperfectly. Now, one of the caveats here is often people will say, well, my digestion's wrecked. Or a common thing is someone that's doing like the carnivore diet, for example. And what I would tell you is that one of the reasons why the carnivore diet seems to work for people isn't because there's some magic with just eating an animal-based diet. It's because you're removing a lot of the fiber. And the gut is so dysfunctional and destroyed that it's the absence of those things that at least temporarily stops the gut issues. That's not a good thing, though. You don't want to ignore the problem. You want to solve it at the root. So what I would actually say, and what I do with my students, is we solve things at the root. Rather than saying, well, I'm not going to eat any vegetables, I'm not going to eat any colors because I don't feel good. Well, you don't feel good because you have so much gut dysbiosis from years of processed junk food, autoimmune reactions, antacids, antibiotics, alcohol, you name it, stress. We need to troubleshoot and problem solve those things, take you through a gut rehab protocol so you can actually handle some of these things. But everyone's a bit different. Everyone can tolerate different degrees of fibrous or different colors of vegetables and fibrous foods. I'm not going to talk about that in this episode. I will be doing a detailed episode on digestive optimization, which is going to be a really good one because this ties into this. But I just wanted to touch on the first thing is eat the rainbow. So with your main meals, and one of the things that I'm known for is my macro bowls. So if you go to YouTube or Pinterest or Instagram and you search macro bowl, you'll see a lot of examples of this. It's essentially a bowl with the different macronutrients placed in it separately. And so you might have your protein, you might have your carbohydrates, your sweet potato or your rice, and then you've got your rainbow veg. Now, because I've been plant-based for 13 years, and so, for example, I might have tempeh as my primary protein. I might add in some chickpeas as like a secondary protein. I'll then do a root vegetable, carbohydrates like a Japanese sweet potato or some butternut squash. By the way, butternut squash is a great fat loss strategy because it's gram for gram less calories than normal potato, and even better is spaghetti squash. Like big portion, very low in calories, very easy on the gut. So there's a hack for you right there. Spaghetti squash is the secret weapon. Now, I will add in microgreens because gram for gram, cup for cup, broccoli microgreens, for example, are much more nutrient rich. There's much more micronutrient density in them, gram for gram, than their fully grown counterparts. So I want to get the highest ROI from every single gram of food that I consume. That's why I will opt for microgreens over fully grown green vegetables. So broccoli microgreens, kale microgreens, arugula microgreens, you name it. Now, obviously, the sourcing of that can be one thing. Maybe you grow some, or maybe you are near a Whole Foods. They typically will have them. But that's one way to get more micronutrients in a smaller package. That matters a lot, and I'm going to explain why this helps with energy and performance soon. So I'll typically do microgreens. I will do zucchini noodles because that's also easy on the gut. So I've got 2 greens. I'll add in spaghetti squash or butternut squash, which is my carbohydrate base. I'll add in some carrot. I'll add in some red peppers. I'll add in some pickled beets. Beets help with nitric oxide production, and nitric oxide helps with what's called vasodilation. So very often, people have issues with blood pressure, or they might get a lot of headaches and migraines because they have a lot of vasoconstriction. Their veins are constricted, clamped down, very narrow and tight. The nitric oxide production in beets helps expand and dilate, open up arterial blood flow. So it's very good for blood pressure. It's very good for like getting a pump when you train. It's very good for oxygen transportation. Because think about this. Part of your ability to enhance your energy and have more energy, literally energy through the day, is your ability to transport oxygen and nutrients through your system. So that's why I focus on all these things, because from a cellular perspective, it helps enhance you from the cells up. So beyond beets, I'll add in some fermented foods for gut health optimization. So either a little bit of natto, or especially kimchi is one of my favorites. And I might even add in an adaptogen, so a lion's mane or shiitake mushroom. Adaptogens are good for brain health. There's a lot of stuff with mushroom consumption that can be very useful. So you can see that I'm adding in these different foods, all with the intention of basically being like a whole food multivitamin. Think of each food as a whole food multivitamin. You might say, well, Fraser, if you're talking about micronutrients and all these different foods and different colors are representative of different vitamins and minerals, why don't I just take a multivitamin and be done with it? And I would say you can do that, and that can help, but I definitely think there is something about what I call a whole food matrix that most people are missing. If all it took was pumping a bunch of multivitamins and supplements, everyone would be in great shape. Everyone would be super healthy. The supplement industry is a massive industry. People take supplements coming out their eyeballs. But the reason why most people are like sick and don't perform well is because the pills and the supplements aren't a whole food matrix. It's not enough. You need cofactors and synergists. I mean, for example, with iron, if someone's not getting enough iron in the system, but they're still eating iron-rich foods, maybe they need more vitamin C. Maybe they need more copper. And so there are other foods and things that you will bring together to act as a series of cofactors, a whole food matrix. So you cannot skip the power of whole foods. That should be the foundation of what you do. And then supplementation just fills the holes. It's a backup system. I focus on checking off all the boxes with all the vitamins and minerals that I need, and then the supplementation plugs the holes. It's the frosting on the cake, basically. So I say this because macro bowls, eat the rainbow, focusing on nutrient density, so microgreens versus fully grown counterparts. Every calorie should fight for its life to be there if you truly, truly want to optimize. Because part of the reason, I see a lot of fitness people, fitness bros, they'll have their meal prep out and it's, they've got their protein, they've got their tilapia and broccoli. Tilapia, broccoli, and potato. And obviously, it being whole food is one thing. That's obviously, a good step in the right direction. But it's a very myopic, one-dimensional model. You're not going to be getting a really wide whole food matrix with that. And I would say early on when you're younger, you can get away with that to some capacity. You just have youthful vigor and your mitochondria are a lot more healthy when you're younger. And so you sort of can get around being depleted with a lot of vitamins and minerals in some way. But I definitely find as we age, it becomes more and more fundamental. It's the difference between someone not only getting to like 10% body fat and being in great shape and feeling really good too, and people either getting to their target and just totally imploding on themselves because their cravings are so high and they feel like death. They're exhausted. They've got brain fog. That is avoidable. And even things like ADHD and anxiety and all the stuff that we think is these psychiatric issues, I would say in many ways are driven by issues around micronutrients. So if you want to optimize your brain and get rid of these ADHD diagnosis type things that every second person has, you want to pay attention to this episode. And I say this because all through my teens, I was diagnosed with ADHD, severe bipolar depression, and severe social anxiety. I was heavily medicated for all three of those things for about 10 years. Everything that I talk about and I teach, and I'm going to be sharing with you in these podcast episodes, is how I was able to wean myself off these medications. I've been now psych med free for about 12 years and totally reinvent my life. Not only reinvent the way that I think, feel, function, my stress tolerance, my stress resistance, but also to sustain the physique that I have. For those of you guys who haven't maybe seen me, I am about 5'9" and about 205 to 210 pounds at about 6 to 8% body fat. And I don't count calories. And I haven't for years. And I feel really good every day, basically. Obviously, it doesn't mean that you don't face your challenges. I've got young kids, family. We all have our challenges with marriage and life and parenting and entrepreneurship and business building and everything. I get it, right? It doesn't mean that your life's free of problems, but it just means that you have a much higher stress tolerance and you can navigate challenging situations because you have more mental clarity. You have a better outlook on life because chemically your brain is optimized. See, people don't realize food is like software and your body and mind are the hardware, a supercomputer. And so if you are feeling crappy, if your energy's low and you're feeling beat up and you're feeling anxious and you can't concentrate, you don't have a Ritalin deficiency. You will often have a micronutrient deficiency. And so rather than putting junk food into the software, think of malware like junk food. What happens when your computer gets malware on it? You don't think the computer's done. You realize that there's malware on the computer and you run some type of antivirus software to get off it. And the computer continues to work well. You don't throw the computer out. The same thing is true for your physiology. You're not broken. And so rather than adding malware into the system, we focus on a good operating system update. A good operating system update, like I mentioned, the first one is eat the rainbow. And then focus on all the different things like foods with one ingredient, clean proteins, whole food carbohydrates, whole food fats, adaptogens, fermented foods, that type of stuff. Now, the next part of the puzzle is you can actually, and this is why I talk about Bloodwork so much, because when you get your blood work run, when you get a detailed blood panel done, where it's checking all your different biomarkers, your total and free testosterone, your estrogen, your pregnenolone, your DHEA, your sex hormones, your thyroid metabolism, your TSH, T3, T4, your vitamin D status, your fasting insulin, your C-reactive protein, your ApoB, you name it, HDL, all the things. When you get all these things run, you can literally optimize those numbers with food. I don't even know if everyone realizes that. This is the key. What I'm saying right now is the key. So when I have a student come in and they get their blood work run, I can look at their data, and you can literally adapt their diet based off their data. So when someone says to you, hey, you should try the XYZ diet, this worked really well for me, do you think you have the same blood work as that person? Everyone is different. And I'm not talking about a blood type diet here. That's not what I'm referring to. What I am referring to, though, is that different vitamins and minerals, when your body consumes those things, will be broken down and used for different hormonal, physiological, and neurobiological functions. So different chemicals, for example, sweet potato can help with dopamine production. And so there's a brain chemical. So with our brain chemistry, dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, GABA. There are different foods that will literally help with that. There's a test you can do online. It's a subjective test. It's quite useful, though. It's called the Braverman test. And you can literally get a ballpark estimation of your approximate brain chemistry. Where's your dopamine at? Where's your acetylcholine at? Most high performers and professionals tend to be all gas and no brakes. So they tend to be acetylcholine dominant and GABA deficient. And that looks like anxiety and ADHD. You can literally optimize how you even think with dietary tactics. And then obviously strategic supplementation use too. So what I will do is I'll look at your blood work, and I'll look at the hormones, the thyroid, the insulin sensitivity, the cardiovascular health. And rather than just going straight to a supplement, or especially rather than just going straight to a medication, medications should be the last point of action. And that's why going to a primary care physician, a doctor, for your diet is not a good idea. I've got a number of MDs and doctors who I'm friends with, and I've got a number of them who have been students of mine. The ones that are awake and aware have been students of mine. Because did you know that when someone does a medical degree, they get approximately 7 hours of nutritional teaching over their entire PhD? 7 hours. They are just taught symptomology and assessing and diagnosing a disease model, and then the type of medication and dosing used to help with that model. That's it. They're not taught preventative, proactive measures. They're not taught root cause medicine. And so if you hope that a doctor will give you the answers of what type of foods you should be adding into your diet based off your blood work, unless they've taken the time to learn these things afterwards and they're actually a very good doctor, they won't have a clue on this stuff. That's where I come in as a nutritionist. I've learned these things. I had to learn these things to solve my own problems first. My physiology is very sensitive. You know, people might look at me and be like, oh, he's so lucky, he's just jacked. You don't realize how sensitive my physiology is. And what I mean by that is, when I was in my 20s and I was eating, sort of a whole food paleo style diet, it was not bad, but it wasn't great. I was still adding in, ice cream and random things. My cholesterol was high. My blood sugar levels were high, so I was had a high level of hemoglobin A1C. So essentially, I wasn't pre-diabetic, but I was insulin resistant. I had low testosterone. I had a high estrogen. All my inflammation markers were kind of elevated. And it wasn't great. And I was actually in okay shape. Like, if you looked at me, I was in okay shape. But my blood work was not good. And you know what happened? I felt tired all the time. I got brain fog all the time. I felt lethargic because of that was reflective of the inflammation in the blood work. And I'll tell you this. I've had a number of fitness influencers come to me behind closed doors and get me to help them, because they were in shape and they had abs and they teach other people how to get in shape, and their blood work was not good. Now, obviously, I commend them for getting help. They could bury their head in the sand and be an egomaniac and think, I don't need to learn anything from anyone. And basically, it's like the blind leading the blind. But they did come to me for help, so I can appreciate and respect that. But I will tell you, when their blood work's not great and they look like they're in shape, they are giving people the wrong model. They're telling people to do things that will create that type of result for them, for you. So that's why I always talk about It's not just enough to have abs. It's not just enough to lose a bunch of weight and be 10% body fat. If you are not feeling high energy, mentally clear, sleeping well, and dialed in. And it's not a trade-off. People think, oh, well, if I'm going to get in great shape, I'm going to feel like crap. That's not true. All bodybuilders do this. And it's not true because I know at my level, I could probably I could get even leaner than I am right now, and I would still feel good. I would still feel good because of all these principles that I have dialed in around micronutrients, colors, nutrient rotation, you name it. So when we look at things like hormones, for example, if you're looking at testosterone, rather than just being someone that jumps straight onto TRT or just goes straight to like some type of testosterone booster, I say to people, solve problems in the right order, meaning looking at your micronutrients in your diet first. I'll give you an example. So with testosterone, total and free, vitamins and minerals like magnesium, zinc, selenium, boron, and vitamin D all help with testosterone optimization. Things like DIM help with estrogen metabolism. Things like iodine, so seaweed, nori sheets, dulse flakes, high-quality seafood, high in iodine helps with TSH and thyroid metabolism, which is like the thermostat of your body. Insulin sensitivity, which is a massive one. Most people are insulin resistant. So they have brain fog, they think it's ADHD, but it's insulin resistance. They don't burn body fat very well because they're insulin resistant. They feel tired all the time, they get up at night to pee a lot because they're insulin resistant. This is another one. Things like cinnamon, Ceylon cinnamon with fruit and protein shakes helps blood glucose stabilization. Things like berberine can help stabilize blood sugar more. There will be things in your diet like the timing of your macronutrients. So I will typically backload post-workout all my antioxidant-rich fruit sugars, blueberries, goji berries, raspberries, red grapefruit juice, post-workout, because I'm getting all those antioxidants, all those vasodilation effects. But when my body's very sensitive to absorb those fruit sugars, post-workout when you've just trained. So think of your body post-workout as this sponge that's ready to absorb fruit sugars and sugars in general. That's when you partition your fruit into that window. Now, a good example is what a lot of people will do is they'll get something like dextrose powder or Gatorade. Because they're like, oh, well, I've heard that, adding sugar into while I'm working out or after my workout's good. But you've got to think of food as a whole package. Do you think dextrose, like corn sugar, or Gatorade is very good for you in general? Outside of the sugar that it's going to give you for glycogen replacement, what other benefits does it even have? I would rather do things like coconut water or medjool dates, red grapefruit juice, berries, because those things not only have the sugars that you need, but they also have electrolytes. They have antioxidants. Bang for buck, guys. Micronutrients are that element of bang for buck where you get more in there, and that's what's going to help you recover faster. It's what's going to help you optimize your energy, decrease cravings. You'll remove some of that mid-afternoon slump. You eat at lunch, and then you want to take a nap. There's a reason for that. Part of that is insulin resistance. It's like I say all these things because when your cardiovascular health is good, when you're insulin sensitive, when your thyroid's great, when your sex hormones are good, you'll have a better mood. You'll have less anxiety. Your body composition will improve. See, people don't realize that if your hormones are all whacked up and you're insulin resistant and your thyroid's slow, you can still show up and train and eat what you think is enough calories and still look like you don't even work out. Because on a chemical level, there's so much inflammation going on and so much dysregulation that when you start to optimize all of these data sets, testosterone, estrogen, all the things I mentioned, through different foods, that changes the game for you. One of the other things that I often talk about is like if you have a high total testosterone, but your free testosterone is low, we want to check sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG. One of the common minerals that can be low if your SHBG is high and it's binding up all that testosterone is boron. So that's where things like prunes, whole prunes or prune juice. So I will often get people to add in a little bit of prune juice or whole prunes post-workout. Those fruit sugars again, and they're getting the boron for helping reduce down the SHBG level, which then liberates more of that total testosterone, making more free available, and that's going to help you with muscle building. It's going to help you with energy and drive and libido and all these things. So you can see here how it's all connected. And I would say that as you get leaner, your margin of error decreases. Your margin for error decreases, meaning when you start to really get in good shape, these little details matter a lot. Like for me, for example, if I was to deviate from my diet for a day and just eat like a normal person would, I would notice a significant drop in my energy levels and performance. You have a lot further to fall when you've climbed up a higher mountain. So when you've climbed up that higher mountain and you're at that higher level, you have a lot further to fall if you slip. Now, that's not a bad thing. If anything, it's a good thing. It's a reminder to you that you've come such a long way and that you are truly a high performer. So just remember, performance increases and micronutrients matter even more. And that's such an important thing to remember. When you're just starting out, you can get away with some of these things. You don't have to have it perfect. But that's a good thing. When you start out, you don't have to have this perfect. You don't have to have every single T crossed and every I dotted. What I would say is, if you're wondering, how do I even determine, what the heck to do? All I would say to you is use an app like Chronometer or MyFitnessPal and track your calories for 3 days. Track for 3 days. Add everything in as accurately as you can. And at the end of those 3 days, look at the averages. Now, over those 3 days, are you consistently hitting your omega-3 intake? Are you consistently hitting magnesium, iron, zinc, boron, all the different things? If there's any areas that are consistently suboptimal, go to ChatGPT or come to me and I can give you help. Business Athlete Council or the Anomaly Project course, little plug, and type in, give me the top 10 healthiest foods that are rich in magnesium. Give me the top 10 rich foods in omega-3s. Give me the top 10 richest foods in selenium. And then you take one or two of those suggestions and you plug them in somewhere into your diet. And you factor in the calories and you factor in the macros and you plug it in. And that's how you backfill and really start to optimize. Now, I will say one thing though. Gut health is important here. And again, that's why I'm going to do a whole topic on gut health optimization, because you aren't just what you eat, you are what you absorb. And so one of the issues, if anyone's ever tried this, eating the rainbow and doing all these things and they didn't feel great, it's because your gut health wasn't optimized. So you're consuming these foods, but you're not absorbing enough of the nutrients. So that is really the foundation, but these principles will apply. Now, think about stress, recovery, sleep, all these different things. Minerals regulate those things. Things like magnesium, sodium, potassium, that regulates, your ability to contract your muscles. It regulates ATP production. Magnesium helps calm the nervous system down, de-stress that nervous system. People think sodium, for example, is a bad thing. But all of these things in the right doses from the right sources helps you with energy levels. It helps moderate your heart rate. It helps with your sleep optimization. It helps with training. You'll perform better in your training. You don't want to be depleting and depriving yourself so much of vital nutrients that when you train, your training is just terrible. That's how most people operate, especially if they're really depleted and they're doing something like 75 hard. Very, very, low quality training. That's never going to create high level results. So think about, there's no macronutrient, there's no protein, carb, or fat that's going to fix your nervous system. That is down to micronutrients. And then obviously when you have a better nervous system, you handle more stress. You're more stress resilient. And that's what helps with recovery. That's what helps with energy. That's what helps with performance. So as a business athlete, I think a lot about like my output, right? Like the training is just a conduit. And I don't think about my output of like, okay, do I need to take more stimulants today? Do I need to take more caffeine? Do I need to take more Ritalin and Adderall? Is there some sleep aids that I can take to try and get better sleep? I think to myself, what are the holes that need plugging? What am I like? What am I missing? And then I've reverse engineered and plugged those holes. And obviously getting the Bloodwork run in conjunction with doing 2 or 3 days of tracking on an app is a very good start point. And then if you want to throw in an extra thing, do the Braverman test. And you've got this little trifecta of data that's really, really useful. So when it comes to like food and supplements and plugging the micronutrient holes, you have to think of food as the foundation of that pyramid. It's the base. Whole food matrix. Supplements fill the gaps. It's like an insurance policy. And the synergy of that is what creates that business athlete. That's the synergy. So I still take a number of supplements. I like to experiment. I like to biohack per se. So I take a lot of extra supplements, even though I'm very diligent with my diet, because I just want to maximize performance as much as possible. So I've come from a place where my life was really tough, guys. I mean, when I had a lot of mental health issues, I did not do well in my life. I was not succeeding. I felt like a failure. Honestly, I felt like a failure. And for many years, I mean, one would argue that in a way I was. So now at 41 years old, at the time of recording the show, I feel like I have an obligation to myself to prove to myself what I'm capable of. And especially when you become a parent, I mean, many of you guys listening will be parents, spouses. You have a family, you have a team, you have people looking to you for leadership, and you realize it's not just about you. And so a big driver for me is if I'm going to be working all day and helping you guys and my students and creating these shows and coaching people and all this stuff, I don't want to get to the end of the day and be so energetically fried that I have no energy for my family. What's the point in any of this if we're either sick and diseased or completely exhausted? And I would say most people fall into one and or two of those camps. I know it. I see it, guys. I communicate and work with a number of guys and women in their 40s and 50s and onwards who come to me, and they might be doing pretty well in business, but they are slaughtering themselves with their health. They're so inflamed. Their blood pressure is so high. Some of them are even on TRT, and they still look terrible. You know, they think you can't just take a bunch of hormone replacement therapy and peptides and expect to solve these problems. That's a micronutrient problem. That's a whole food matrix problem. That's why the supplements don't work when they're just in isolation. It has to be a combination of smart training, stress management, sunlight and movement, sleep, whole food, foods with one ingredient as a base. So all of this to say, micronutrients in many ways are the missing element. You want to be saying to yourself every day, you know, where were my different vitamins and minerals? Where did my antioxidants come from? Where did my polyphenols come from? You know, I love using a high-quality extra virgin olive oil for the polyphenols, or a high-quality dark cacao powder that I'll add to my smoothies. So I'm always thinking about bang for buck and high ROI additions that you can add in. And I promise you this, it will take what you're already doing and it will put it on rocket boosters. You'll notice that you don't get sick as often. You'll notice that your energy seems to improve more consistently. You'll notice you won't have those peaks and troughs through the day. You'll notice that you sleep better. You'll notice your mood improves. Think about a time where you slept really well and your mood was really good. That's such a gift to the people around you because you show up as that best version of yourself. It's like a very attractive state to be in. People feel that. They do. And you're a walking billboard for it. So today, go out there and implement some of these things I've talked about. In my mastermind calls, I always talk about taking this stuff and making it real world. What I mean is don't just listen to this, feel good that you've just listened to something, and then just go on about your day. Take some principles, apply it, and share it. Tag me. I'm telling you guys, macronutrients are one part of the equation. It's the start, but you will never become that A player, that high-level business athlete, if you do not focus on nutrient quality and micronutrients. And that's why I have the result that I have. So if you want that too, focus on that other part of the equation. Go out there and create that version of yourself that the world needs.